Welcome to this edition of Security and Compliance Weekly. We are absolutely delighted to welcome one of our loyal listeners to the show today, none other than Mr. Jim Gilsinn. Jim is a principal industrial consultant for Dragos, and he's going to help us through a discussion of the challenges and implications of security and compliance as it pertains to things like industrial control systems, operational technology, that's OT, I think, and critical infrastructure. In our first segment, we'll discuss the problems and complexities associated with trying to secure these environments, often using very antiquated technology. Try to figure out how compliance plays into the whole thing, and then in our second segment, we'll shift gears and talk about how to fix the problems, recommendations on coping with these challenges. All this and more as we discuss ICS and OT with Jim Gilsinn. So join us as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly.
Welcome to this edition, episode 64 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on March 9th, 2021. It's a little bit spring-like outside. I hope it is wherever you are as well. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and joining me today are my co-host, Mr. Scott Lyons, and the irrepressible Mr. Josh Marpet. Gentlemen, welcome.
Why you say that? Irrepressible, like whatever. Anyway.
Exactly. Hey, if you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, never fear. You can access all of the content on demand, whether you registered originally before the live event or not. Do this by going to securityweekly.com/unlocked and either click on the button to register or click on the button to log in. Also, our next live webcast will be on March 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. It's actually Eastern Daylight because I think we get that this weekend. Woohoo! On this webcast, you will learn how to prepare Linux hosts for unexpected threats. I wonder what you do with the expected threats. But anyway, join us for this webcast by going to securityweekly.com/webcast and register now. And of course, as usual, if you missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are all available in our portfolio of content and you can get to that by going to securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, today, our guest, as I mentioned in the promo, in the intro, is one of our loyal listeners who also participates very actively in the discussion that goes on our Discord channel when he can make it. So we wanted to make sure that he was locked in for the full hour today, so we asked him to be on the show. So I'm pleased to welcome Jim Gilsinn. He is Principal Industrial Consultant at Dragos. Welcome, Jim, to Security and Compliance Weekly.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's good to be here. Finally got a chance to actually show up for the whole show.
Yay! Yep. You also have to be active on Discord while you're talking. It's really challenging. Good luck.
I've also challenged everyone on Discord. $5 for anyone who can make Jim giggle uncontrollably while on air.
We'll see.
Too hard. Hey, Jim, let's start off by, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into cybersecurity, particularly how'd you get into the whole area of industrial control systems and OT, not necessarily a normal path. So enlighten us.
Sure. So I'm actually an electrical engineer. I specialized in controls and robotics in college. So, and while I was at college, I did co-op program. And so I actually started doing my co-op program at NIST in the engineering lab. I was doing unmanned ground vehicles and robot systems, sensors, a lot of this kind of different things. While I was there at college, I was also doing Apple networking. and things. So this is back before OS 10 and all this kind of stuff. This was old
Apple Talk.
Putty,
This was Apple Talk, wasn't it?
Yep, putty boxes and Apple Talk and the whole deal. So while I was at college, I was doing that. And then when I would come and do my co-ops, I would also be sort of helping out with the Apple Mac administration. And then from there, I ended up basically, actually, after college, I started working, doing my engineering, things like that. And then about 2 months in, our Unix sysadmin decided to leave. And so since I was already helping out with the Mac admin, they basically said, okay, here, we've got these Suns, Solaris boxes, and SGIs. Why don't you go and do this? So for a couple of years, I actually went and did sysadmin work, including like all the different networking and everything like that. And then from there, I got back into engineering, and around 2000-ish, I switched projects to basically doing industrial networking. So at the time, Ethernet networking was just coming and being accepted into the industrial space. We were working with the auto industry quite a bit, and they wanted to implement industrial networking Ethernet down on the plant floor itself. So I got asked to kind of look into performance of industrial Ethernet. And along with that, we were also starting up a new standards committee on industrial networking called the ISA 99 committee. And I'll get into that in a minute. But basically, so that was on industrial security. So I started learning a lot about industrial networking, got involved with things in cybersecurity. And then the standards committee was basically standing up lots of different standards on the cybersecurity for industrial systems, which eventually became the ISA IEC 62443 series. If you actually look in the NIST CSF, either version 1.0 or 1.1, there are these couple standards that show up in there, 62443, 2.1, and 3.3. I helped actually write those, their industrial control system security program, and the catalog of controls for industrial, like ICS systems. So come around 2012, I decided to leave the government, and I went off and started to become a consultant. I started I started at a small consulting firm that was doing safety and security. And then about a year and a half ago, I left there and joined Dragos as a consultant there. And so I've been working in a wide variety of industrial environments, pretty much done most of the different industrial environments. So manufacturing, oil and gas, utilities, food and pharma. Haven't done pulp and paper, but I've done a large number of different industries since then.
Okay, that was an incredibly dry recitation, and let's be honest, it's actually incredibly much more exciting.
Well, we'll Jim, get there, hopefully, Josh.
Like, Jim, you're so frigging modest. I just want to reach across the screen and smack you. Like,
well, I suck at like touting myself. That's always the way.
Oh man, you're one of the few people that I'll literally be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And you'll be like, "I'm in Riyadh." Like, what? You were in Virginia 2 days ago. Yeah, well, it's 2 days later. Come on, man. Things happen.
Yeah. So as my consulting job, I've done work in a number of different industries and regions of the world. I've been to oil and gas fields in Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, UAE. I've been to lots of different regions in the Middle East, and
have you been to Tucson?
US. What's that?
Have you been to Tucson?
Tucson, Arizona? No.
Tucumcari, Tehachapi. I'm singing a song lyric. Never mind.
Oh, dear
Hey, I
God.
wanted to, first of all, full disclosure, this is a non-sponsored interview. Jim Gilsinn is friends and family.
Yes.
So, Security Weekly is not endorsing yada, 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 whatever all the legal stuff is. I am curious, though, and I imagine some of our listeners are too. Just tell us briefly what Dragos, I guess I pronounce it wrong.
Yes, it
Dragos
is
is all
Dragos.
about. Okay. Tell us about Dragos, what the company is about, and a little bit of what you do for them.
Sure. So Dragos is sort of broken up into three main areas. We have our Dragos platform, which is a monitoring and analytics platform for the industrial environment. We have our Intel group, which does a lot of Intel feed, along with studying TTPs and activity groups. And then we have professional services. There's other groups along the way, but I'm a part of the professional services group, which does we do a lot of different assessments. So it's architecture reviews, vulnerability assessments, pen tests, tabletop exercises, red teaming. We do a lot of different activities to try and help assess work for different companies. There's also general consulting. So I've done things like spend 9 months trying to help develop the cybersecurity regulations for a country. We do work with other fields that are just starting to understand that they actually have industrial control systems. So like working in data centers, trying to figure out how they actually do protect their systems so that they can run at like 5 nines or better reliability, things like that.
Okay, great. And I would be remiss, Jim, if I did not ask you our compulsory hot seat question, which it's an open-ended question, as you know, but I would be intrigued and interested and try to persuade you to answer in the context of the particular niche of the field within which you work. Trying to be too fancy with my words. So, what do you see as where do you fall on this continuum between security and compliance as it pertains to ICS and OT and critical infrastructure and the like?
So, to start with, regulations in the industry or in the industrial world are few and far between. Some industries are very heavily regulated, things like NERC CIP for the electric industry within the US. But then there's also other industries that are very sort of hands-off with regulation. So the idea of one whole overarching regulation for everything really is difficult. I do think that regulation where it does apply has helped. So at least to raise the bar to a minimum level. So things like NERC CIP, while people complain about it all the time and people try and work around it as much as possible, the industries and the groups that have actually taken NERC CIP to heart and tried to implement it properly have generally done a good job improving their security. And then other industries that are not regulated, it varies really widely based on the maturity of the organization. So some organizations that are more mature have actually taken what exists in terms of the standards that are out there and tried to apply them as best they can. Yeah, there may be areas where they're not doing as well, but for the most part, as long as they're trying to actually work with the standards and understand them, it has helped them be more secure. But then there's plenty of organizations, just like everywhere, that totally refuse to or try and avoid the standards as much as possible. So it really is I think having the regulations has helped to push things forward. But just like with PCI and other standards, people try to minimize their potential impact, so they try and weasel their way out of actually having the standards applied to them.
Great. So,
Is it that they try to, I'm sorry, Jeff, is it that they try to weasel out, or they're not understanding what the actual risk is to the environment?
Yeah, so that's the thing. It really is a risk to the systems and risk to the environment and health and safety and things that they should be considering. But when it comes to some of the regulations, they do their best to de-scope themselves in any way, shape, or form to avoid it. In some cases. In other cases, people take it as a proactive step to say, okay, well, we should be doing this throughout our whole organization. So.
Well, so my last sort of setup question, which sort of touches on what Scott was just asking, is, there's been a lot of discussion over the last month or so in various social media platforms, various online groups that I participate in, and it all kind of revolves around the breach, the hack of that water treatment facility in somewhere in Florida. I think it was around Tampa. I'm guessing that you're probably a tad more familiar with the circumstances and details of that event. It jumps out for me because in sort of the strata of industries that the cybersecurity vendors and pro services companies go after, they're certainly not in the sweet spot of the enterprise, large funded, mature organizations that have the budget to, we can sell into. They're not the typical public sector, sort of DOD, DHS, national defense type of conversation. They're not the typical small guys in the private sector. They're sort of this, in my mind, the lowest rung on the ladder, public sector, but local government type of thing, in terms of the usual discussion about they're not going to do anything unless they're regulated or if they comply. The question is, can you enlighten us a little bit, or just explain to us a little bit, what you're able to about what happened at this water treatment facility, and let's just talk there. Take that as a lesson or as the springboard for the discussion of, why aren't companies doing more in terms of security? What are the implications of lack of regulation, if you will?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, so that was the Oldsmar water treatment system. It was around Tampa, and this is actually just slightly before the Super Bowl, if I remember right. It was like the weekend before the Super Bowl.
Yes.
So what happened there at that particular facility was that someone gained access to a remote management software. Everyone's going to jump at this. It's TeamViewer. Basically they gained access to the system, to the HMI controller, the human machine interface, where these are the panels that the operators actually sit at, and they can do different controls. And they changed one of the set points for, if I remember, it's sodium hydroxide. Yeah, sodium hydroxide in the water. And they changed it from 100 to 11,100. If that had been allowed to continue, what would have happened is that would have caused potential problems for potential health effects on people in the area. The operator actually saw it happening. He saw the mouse actually moving, and then so when the person logged out, the operator actually went and changed the set point back. So it was a short duration kind of thing that didn't have any long-lasting effects. Now, with those kind of water systems, there are additional safety checks along the way that basically go and look for different chemicals in the water. And so there would have been potentially other checks and balances that could have caught that happening. But if the operator wasn't sitting there, it would have taken them a little bit longer to figure that out.
Yeah, they said it would never actually get to the faucets. It would never actually get to the water.
It is doubtful it would have gotten to the point where it would have gotten to the water because of the other checks and balances in place. Not saying it couldn't happen, but it's saying that it would have probably been caught by other things before it actually made it out to the environment. Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Sorry, get Jeff. I'm sorry.
Well, real quick, and then I'll let you go.
No,
and maybe we're asking the same question. But so, how much of this threat is sort of the media hype, slow news cycle? Let's play up on but it could have happened. Versus you're in the field, you're in the profession, you're familiar with these types of organizations, and there are in fact checks and balances in there. Just how real was the hype? I guess is my question.
So the fact that they went after this, and so from what I understand in that particular environment, that was not the main screen where where that particular set point was. I don't know the full details. I don't have direct knowledge of that incident, but from what we know, we have a guy on. At Dragos that's very well knowledgeable about water systems. He used to work at them. And basically he went through that and said that in reality, that probably is not going to be on the main screen. So someone had to actually go and look for that setting in the HMI to actually go and find that particular piece of data. So someone actually went through and was actively looking for that piece of information. It wasn't just some script kiddie that got the HMI up on their screen and just started plugging numbers in. Someone actually went and looked for that particular value, at least from what the implications that we have heard. Again, I have no direct knowledge of it. So someone was actively trying to do something to that system to cause bad things to happen, to cause sickness and health effects for real people. They may not have fully understood the entire process, so they may not have understood that there were other checks and balances in place, but they actively went and tried to do bad things. So this is it's not just some person that was going out to try and do something and didn't really fully understand what was going on. They understood a little bit more.
Go ahead, Josh.
So, I mean, I've got a slightly more off-the-wall question. So I know what everybody wants to know.
And you wonder why I call you irrepressible. But go ahead.
How do you make gas lines explode?
With explosives?
I mean, the movies say it can be done, so it has to be true.
Yeah, the movies make it out to be really easy. Yeah. The making the gas lines explode is movie magic.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that have to go through. I mean, like kill chains and full like second stage kill chains where you get into actually process control and things. One of the things back with the Oldsmar incident, especially has to do with the maturity of the organizations and the maturity of the regulations in that environment. Water and wastewater is considered one of the least mature cybersecurity for cybersecurity in the industrial environment. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're usually local. They're very they're large numbers of municipalities that control their own water, and so when they have to go and make those cybersecurity improvements, they may have to actually go out to some sort of local water board and ask for a 1 cent rate hike that then has to be sent out to the voters in the local region, and they have to basically approve this 1 cent rate hike on their water usage. So these kind of things end up basically being very similar to the discussion a few weeks ago by Wendy Nather on the cybersecurity poverty line. These groups are extremely low on that poverty line. They're very tight on their margins. If they have to do anything, they have to go out and get customer approval for these rate hikes, and that's not easy to come by. So they are working on a shoestring budget, trying to do everything they can. That's actually one of the reasons why they installed TeamViewer, was because they were trying to do maintenance at remote facilities on third shift, when you've got to like call in the engineer from their home to try and do something that the operators can't do themselves. So these kind of situations exist because people need to do the work that they need to do, even though it may not be done in a great and purely cybersecure mindset.
Okay, let me repeat back to you what I just heard to make sure that I got this right. What you're telling me, if I heard you correctly, is that the people that make sure that the water my child drinks is clean, the people that make sure that I get electricity to my house, the people that make sure that, the sewage is properly treated before it gets, put back into the system, are scrambling around like it was the 1990s, and without the money, the budget, the time, the personnel to do it. And they're managing, and God bless them. I'm not bitching at them in any way, shape, or form. But they're being told no more often than yes, and they're not being given the tools they need to do their job. And they're in critical infrastructure, just to be clear.
I would say that that's probably pretty accurate. That for the most part, utilities around the country, outside of a few of the larger utilities, are doing the jobs that they can, wearing 5 to 10 hats and trying to get water, electricity, wastewater, whatever, moving.
Being done properly. Yeah, and done properly.
Exactly.
No, and I in no way, shape, or form do I want to denigrate the people actually doing this, because like wearing 5 to 10 hats, which half of them they weren't, hired for, or then they're not getting paid for. I can do nothing but be impressed and horrified at the same time that they're having to do this.
Yeah.
What's particularly fascinating and disturbing about what you're pointing out as well is, I've given back in the old times when I gave conference talks. One of the talks I give, sometimes I bring up the way I learned the classic risk model in the DoD, and this isn't about the risk model, but I bring up the classic one where it's ultimately the risk of loss of human life, whether it's troops on the ground or citizens abroad or citizens at home for that matter. And then I overlay a risk model for the private sector that basically makes it, well, it's all about money, because all the defenses and all the mitigations, they all cost money, and the risk you're calculating is financial loss, and so on and so forth. What's particularly exacerbating about this scenario, though, is you're talking about companies and organizations, again, where the loss isn't so much a financial loss, it's back to loss of human life, which is probably why they're willing to take on all the extra duties and wear 5 or 10 hats, even though they're not getting paid, they're not getting funded, they don't have the backing and support, but they realize what's at risk, and God bless them for doing that.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Please, no way, shape, or form take this as yelling at the people doing the work, because I have nothing but admiration for that. I remember doing that literally back in the 1990s. Like, we don't have a tool to do this. Well, you better figure something out, because it's got to get done.
Yeah.
So we did. I mean, we would scrape something together from some obscure web page, or, call up a developer friend and be like, a 6-pack of beer if you build something that does this for me, or whatever. And we managed. But to do that in critical infrastructure is terrifying. So let's, I'm going to sort of take this in a similar direction, but like, what do you see as the solution for this, Jim? I mean, is there a solution for this?
That's the second segment, Josh.
Damn it. All right, fine. Be that way.
Let's keep painting the problem.
Don't jump the gun.
Pay attention to the damn show notes, you irresponsible host, you.
So I will say that a lot of the solutions that people have tried to figure out are things that they have found that work. So it may be some vendor solution that they're paying for to actually do something. Some people do find homebrew solutions to do things, but in most part, in critical infrastructure, they don't usually do that because of the fact that, okay, so there are some solutions that are there to do that, and there are some homebrew things, but usually what happens is then it's the one guy that knows how to do it that retires or dies, and the software is like 20 years old and no one's touched it because Bob knew how to do this, and no one wants to do anything with it anymore. Or they'll end up with vendor solutions, and I mean, industrial space, you'll end up with vendors that literally like go out of business, but their products are still being used. So they have to find other solutions. There's a lot of these kind of things that happen in the industrial world that just are difficult to deal with. I mean, I've been in a couple nuclear sites where I was doing work installing SIEM, and we were installing SIEM around VAX VMS systems and PDP-11s because those systems absolutely had to work. We actually looked at trying to like recompile the core operating system to add syslog just so we could get those get data out of there, which was considered to be too much of a risk. So we had to just monitor around that and monitor the network around those systems because it had to be up and running the entire time. So,
Jim, let me break in here real quick. For those that don't know the words that you just said, can you break down those systems real quick? You said VAX, PDF, something.
Yeah.
Can you break that down?
The PDF-11. It's PDP.
PDF-11.
So there is a PDP-11, which is a computer system from the mid-'80s. It's actually considered a mini computer for people that actually know the term. It has the green clicky key. It's got the terminal. It's actually a serial terminal into the system with the green sort of like Fallout looking screen for typing on it. So, and then VAX VMS systems are one of the original Unix systems, not Linux, but Unix operating systems that basically was just another flavor like HPUX or DEC alphas or things like that. So,
well, mainframe.
VAX VMS. Well, the system we were using is actually just was a computer, a desktop style, or I mean, basically like actual desktop, meaning like about the size of a small table and filing cabinet kind of computer size.
But I mean, I have seen VAX VMS running on mainframes, older operating systems, more rudimentary. That back in the days where we used to define computers as small, medium, and large, or micro, mini, maxi, and all that kind of stuff, which we don't really do anymore. It was interesting as I was preparing for the show. I was thinking about what are these different things that we're covering: industrial control, OT, critical infrastructure, and I started thinking about critical infrastructure. Well, I started thinking about all of them. It's like, it's not just the power plants and the utilities. It's anything manufacturing, anything where there's robotics and automation and assembly. And so I looked up, I Googled, and I found something that actually, I'm not sure what the date of it is, but it was, some sort of government document that identifies 16 different sectors or areas that are that roll up under critical infrastructure, which you can probably
NPPD
get you to vote.
That's the NKIC. It's the MPPD. Actually, there's 16 now, if I remember right. And it also specifies the different agencies that are involved in regulating them and things.
Well, and as I was looking at the list, I mean, there's a lot of, that should be here. Okay, that's, a lot of them were expected. Some were a little bit of a surprise, but, if you think about any place where there's automation in terms of production and assembly and manufacturing, they're probably falling into one of these sectors. So it's huge. I mean, this, like PCI, it touches just about everything there. I got one in the first segment.
You did.
I got it first, though.
PCI.
I actually called it out first.
So we're up 2-1.
Damn it. And it's funny you mentioned, you've been to nuclear power plants. I had a very short, abbreviated stint working for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, ostensibly to help them conduct security assessments of the various nuclear power plants in the U.S. This is public knowledge, but it scares the poo-poo out of me. The government decided shortly after 9/11, which was 2001, hey, perhaps our nuclear power plants might become a target. Maybe we should put together a program for assuring the security of the plants and put together a program for assessing them. I was hired by
0809 and NEI 1310.
I was hired.
Not that you know anything about that, Jim.
Late 2017, early 2018, the NRC was getting ready to conduct the very first round of official full-blown assessments. So it took them 17 years to get to the point where they could actually begin to start doing the assessments. There's more to that story. We should do a whole segment sometime. And a lot of it's public knowledge. I'm not because it's a public industry. A lot of politics obviously involved, but I freaked out at the time, which is one of the reasons I think I'm not there anymore, is because I was starting to not blow whistles, but just like, dude, not only does the emperor has no clothes, but he's on the internet and it's being broadcast live.
The emperor has an OnlyFans. Okay. So
seriously. Are we touching on the problems? Because, first segment, we're supposed to be painting, just how bad things are. Is there any major touch points that we haven't talked about or brought up yet, Jim?
So I think I've thrown it up this is weeks and probably months ago, but risk really is what these companies think about. They really do think about risks. Almost every company I've ever dealt with understands the risks to their business. They may not understand the cybersecurity implications of those risks, but they do actually go and do planning for what happens from financial risk if they go down, what happens if they don't, or what is the value of a human life if it's personnel that work there, like an employee gets hurt, or if it's general public that gets hurt. They have like calculations on long-term critical like health effects if they've got a release of some toxic chemical or something like that, and they have to spend time to clean it up or things. They actually go through and figure out a lot of those different risks, and the better organizations, the more mature organizations, are actually doing more calculations of how the cybersecurity impacts of those potential impacts are coming out. And one of the things that I definitely try and do is when I work with these companies, I definitely try and look at the risks to those systems. We actually have a process called a crown jewel analysis that we use to try and figure out what are the crown jewels and what are the risks to those environments that we go through.
As you're evaluating the crown jewels, do you ask your clients to cough?
No.
I made him giggle.
Turn your head and
for
cough.
the record, Josh.
It's not giggling, but okay.
It's not giggling. It was close.
I owe you a drink. It's okay.
You owe me a visit is what you owe me. All right. Well, let's take a quick break. And we'll come back and hopefully we'll talk about some positive things like how do we address this? How do we fix this? Is there a role for regulation and compliance? I'm kind of very seriously, I'm curious because a lot of the companies we talk about, especially the utilities, they charge consumers for the goods and services. I got to believe they accept credit cards. So is there a play for PCI in these companies? We'll talk about all that in the second segment after this quick break.